Future, how architects are shaping urban air mobility infrastructure, insight, challenges, and regulatory pathways. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with such a stunning panel to discuss one of the most transformative advancements in urban air planning, urban air mobility. As cities become more congested and the demand for efficient transport solutions grows, the role of architects, urban planners, and regulators in the design the future-ready infrastructure is more critical than ever. Today, we will explore the intersection of innovative design, technological advancements, and regulatory pathways that will define how we integrate vertiports, eVTOL hubs, and aerodromes into our urban air environment. My name is Benjamin Spiske, and I'm an architect and expert in vertical infrastructure with Bad Swiss and Aeronix, the leader in heliport and vertiport design and planning. I'm honored to be moderating this discussion with experts who have played a pivotal role in designing and regulating the future of air mobility. Let's introduce our panelists, what is maybe a bit long because of the impressive CVs of our guests. Sally, Jamal Al-Badry is an associate partner at Foster Partners with expertise in computational design and digital fabrication. She specialized in emerging technologies, innovative designs, and sustainable infrastructure. Her previous experience includes re-owned firms like HPP Architekten in Germany, Kengo Kuma Associates in Japan. At Foster Partners, she pioneers strategies that integrate smart design and human-centric approaches. Stephen C. Philpott Sr. is the CEO and co-founder of Sky, leading UAM in solutions in digital airspace and city integration. With over 30 years of experience, he designed a 4D trajectory reference framework as a conduit between cities and their commercial drone and taxi ecosystem. He's an FAA commercial drone pilot and a member of the ASTM NASA UTM API Specifications Working Group. Thank you. Ibrahim Mansour is a senior urban designer at ACOM with over a decade of experience in urban planning, architecture, and project coordination. Previously, he held key roles at Arab Architects, Gulf House Engineering, leading multiple disciplinary teams and specialized in concept design, schematic planning, and detailed project development. Anna Mieszek is an architect and associate partner with extensive experience in transportation infrastructure projects worldwide, including the design and development of airports in Europe, Latin America, and the Middle East. Anna's expertise lies in large-scale transportation buildings, where a passion of innovative and efficient design solutions has consistently driven her work. Yves Morier has an extensive experience in aviation safety, airworthiness regulations, and innovative air mobility. He spent decades in EASA, JAA, the Joint Aviation Authorities, and DGAC, the French CAA, shaping aviation regulations and certification frameworks. He continues to share his knowledge on regulations, safety, and certification with professionals worldwide since he retired in 2019. Thank you, Yves, for that. Let me provide you a teaser about today's discussion. Architects and urban planners are on the forefront of designing infrastructure for urban air mobility. Unlike traditional transit systems, AAM requires a seamless integration of air and ground operations. What role do you see architects playing in shaping the future of these spaces, and how can design contribute to making AAM more viable and sustainable reality? I'm happy to hear thoughts from Sally, Ibrahim, and Anna sharing insights into urban air integration, sustainability, and user experience. The digitalization of planning and design is transforming aerodrome development. How are cutting-edge software platforms, AI, and real-world flight simulations enabling architects and engineers to optimize vertiport planning? What are the biggest challenges in bridging design with operational efficiency? Stephen and Sally will bring a lot of knowledge regarding AI and digital twin simulations. I hope Ibrahim elaborates on the real-world application of city planning. One of the most complex aspects of OAM development is aligning architectural innovation with regulatory requirements, and what are the key considerations architects need to keep in mind to ensure that a vertiport infrastructure meets both operational needs and compliance standards. I'm looking forward to hear from Yves, his insights on EASA, FAA regulations, followed by the discussion of the whole panel and designers and aviation authorities. Let's get started. Ibrahim, my first question to you. What are the main differences when planning an aerodrome for OEM? How do vertiports differ from traditional aerodromes and heliports in terms of infrastructure, regulatory requirements, and operational considerations? You're on mute.
Thank you very much, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, first of all, to talk about the topic that is reshaping the way we think about the urban infrastructure and urban air mobility. Jumping into your question, which is an interesting question, I can say that the key difference between traditional airdromes, heliports, and vertiports lie in their infrastructure, regularity framework, and operational models. So if I will take one of these and do a quick comparison in the infrastructure differences, starting with the traditional airports, talking about the design itself. When we say traditional airports, the design for fixed-wing aircraft, maybe with long runways, taxiways, and large terminal buildings. When we talk about heliports, specifically, it's designed for helicopters, which require, let's say, landing pads instead of runways. And when we talk about vertiports, I think we talking about a vertical takeoff and landing aircraft with requiring compact landing takeoff zones to optimize for efficiency. This is just a quick comparison between the infrastructure differences. Steve or Yves?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the baseline considerations in terms of the difference between the design of traditional airports, heliports versus vertiports is that when we first started developing airports or heliports, it was really just a place to take off and land, right? Vertiports are going to have a lot more volume intentionally. So what we're designing in are not just places to take off and land, but the ability to handle the number of aircraft. And if it is on airport or if it is off airport as a design, that'll dictate how much flow of aircraft, people, cargo is going to come in, and we have to design around that. If it is an off airport in a dense metropolitan area, how do you now integrate that facility or that parcel into that existing urban environment? And that goes from that physical building and place to the power grid, to the traffic management system, to the people mover consideration, sidewalk allocation. So I think there are a lot more moving parts when you think about what McKinsey said, McKinsey and Company, the consulting company said a few years ago, is that there could be over 50 new systems incorporated into vertiports that airports don't have today, in addition to the airport systems, right? So the architectural requirements have myriad more complexities to it. However, I do think that we have a baseline that was established when we first built the airports, not knowing that we have these high transaction volumes, not knowing that we would have all these people. We know this in advance of developing the vertiport infrastructure. So we're designing, I think all of us designing in all of those considerations up front.
No, that's right. That's right. It's very interesting what he's saying. Anna, what is your take on that? What do you see it from your end?
Yes, I think Ibrahim mentioned that about the difference between the airport, the traditional airport that we know nowadays, and the jumping to vertiports, that the scale of the operation will actually decrease. So if we are looking as an architect or designer from the level of service or passenger experience, I think it will be more private. That would actually downscale the huge processes that we have nowadays. Also, what I think is interesting that if we are talking about integrating vertiports into urban cities, basically, that will merge the flows of passengers with the city life.
Yeah, interesting. I don't want to skip you, Sally, so give you 2 cents on that. I know
yeah,
you
thank
want.
you. So, yeah, I wanted to emphasize about the strategic location and positioning of the vertiport versus the traditional airports. Actually, we know that usually the airports tends to be outside the city, while what we're imagining the vertiports are to be integrated within the urban fabric, which really is going to enhance our air mobility experience as a result. And as users, it's going to make it way more accessible than our access to airports nowadays. So it's really going to reshape our cities and how we think of the land uses and the zoning of the cities we're designing in the future, and how to strategically position these within existing cities themselves. So I think that would be a very interesting experiment or a field to explore in the near future, hopefully. Yeah,
interesting. Let's go maybe to the next question, because you already said that to implement it in an existing, let's say, urban environment, that requires also a lot of other things, just let's say flying in a vehicle. So how can architects and regulators collaborate to ensure that open air mobility infrastructure meets both? On the event, we all the architects meeting the design innovation, but on the other hand, the regulatory compliances. I would like to hear from Yves, because he's the real expert here on the table, to what are his thoughts about that.
Well, thank you very much, Ben. I would say from a regulator perspective, putting a vertiport in a city raise quite a number of issues. You need first to take into account the possibility of turbulence that could be created by buildings. One way to avoid it is to put it on the top of a building, but it may not be the easiest solution if you want them to communicate with ground transport. So there are also probably concerns which are related to what is called heat island in a city, which is places where the temperature is higher than the rest of the city, and in particular the rest of the countryside, which could affect the performance of the aircraft. And probably the big problem will be to define, I would say, how, in which direction the eVTOLs will take off and land. Because if they take off or land vertically in the last phase of the operation, they will then have to climb, and they have to climb taking into account the failure or possible failure, partial failure, of course, of their propulsion system. So the difficulty would be to find, I would say, those takeoff ways and landing and approach paths that are avoiding obstacles. So it may be perhaps the difficult thing will be to find a way by which you can have a on the ground. It's probably not the most difficult issue, but in my view, the big difficult issue will be how to identify how the aircraft will take off and land. They still need to be more or less doing that in front, with facing the wind to get the wind support to take off. And that is probably a bit of a difficulty to install, I would say, to find the right location and to avoid the obstacles that are around. And that's one of the points that need to be looked at. Of course, another issue will be, from a city perspective, is that the location should be preferably close to a public transport system, and we will have to take into account the noise. You are in a city, so there will be noise. So that's, I would say, the issue of finding the optimal location, taking into account all those elements, is probably one of the big challenges, in my view, to put a vertiport. At the difference of a new airport, for example, a new airport start from scratch. It's far from the city, and you can start from scratch. But here, you will have to start in the city itself. Thank you.
That brings a lot of other risk we may be not considering today, as I understood. I see already Anna is keen on answering this question because she has a lot of experience on airport planning. Anna, it's your stage. You're on mute, by the way.
Yes, I unmuted myself because I've made a long because I don't know where to start. I mean, Yves, you said a lot of things that that are around a few topics that are the concern of the challenges of creating vertiports in the cities. So what I wanted to start with this question is the typical problem that we have nowadays also with planning of the airports, the land and the space. So, okay, if we start a greenfield, we also might have problems with land availability, but then in the city, where we're going to put those vertiports? Do we create a separate building that is an ownership of the company that is basically owning the Yves lots or the electrical drones? And then do we rent a space on the top? Then how it's going to be separate? Like, isn't to be too much congestion of those elements in the city. Then again, what was said before, the noise pollution, that anyways, this is an aircraft, this is a vehicle that will create noise, and not everyone would like to have a vertiport next to their apartment building or office building due to that. And then environmental aspect of the of this location in the dense cities where we already have a problem with sustainability, with the exhausts, and however, or if we have electrical or different source of energy, we still have fumes, we still have exhausts. So so that might be a problem. And what is my kind of concern, that always what we take under consideration with the airports, the safety and security. So also I annotated here the takeoffs and landings, and if something fails, but what if there will be a security breach? This one actually is quite an interesting topic for vertiports, in my opinion. I think that I will leave it here.
Thank you. I thought about asking a question to Stephen in this case. Stephen, how do you think, I mean, you live in Chicago. Imagine that tomorrow we have eVTOLs flying around your head.
I think about that every morning. That's my goal, to have drones and commercial air taxis flying around. One of the biggest issues that I don't think we talk about from a policy standpoint is that these aircraft fly shorter distances, which means that, and we're talking off airport for the most part, they fly shorter distances in close proximity to the top of the heads of people. And so there has to be, within the route planning and route structure from one aerodrome to the next, there has to be predictable emergency landing areas. There has to be predictability in terms of fuel accessibility along those routes. And to Anna's point, do you rent these areas? Do you outright buy these areas? Who owns it? Is it municipal? Is it public-private? And if that's the case, now how do you standardize these areas across? So when you start talking about policy meeting, architecture meeting, enablement, you really have to talk about this new thing. Hey, we have to employ more aerodromes in these denser spaces than we've ever had to before, because our airports are meant, for the most part, to fly, hundreds of miles between each other. So that's a concern that I think is not going to be easily worked out, but it has to have a conversation between all those stakeholders from the inception that idea. Oh yeah, I want that air taxi. I want that drone to really move across my city very efficiently and effectively for my customers.
Yves, you want to give something on that?
Yeah, it's a very good point that has been raised by Steve, and thank you for raising it. That's an issue which has actually been addressed by EASA has developed prototype rules for vertiports. So they address mostly what I would say the air. They address mostly, of course, infrastructure on the ground, the necessary marking, the lighting of land at night, I would say how to those surface to guarantee that you're not hitting obstacles when you take off and land. And they've also addressed what they have called the sort of alternate vertiport where an aircraft would have to land. Because you could imagine a situation where you vertiport, just take an example, one aircraft has crashed on it, so it's not usable anymore, another one is coming, and this another one should be able to land somewhere. And in the philosophy that has been developed by EASA, it has to be something like another vertiport. So a surface which would first, there shouldn't be people on it, it should be freely available, and it should have, I would say, the same more or less constraint about how to land and take off than a normal vertiport. The idea is that EASA has developed flying over cities, densely populated cities, and emergency landing is not acceptable. So to more or less crash in the street is not acceptable. The idea is that you need to be able to do continued safe flight and landing. So even with a reason of a vertiport blocked or a failure of the propulsion system, you still be able to land properly the aircraft somewhere. And that could be a constraint indeed, because it cannot be just a place where you land. This place, you have to make sure that it can be really accessed in normal time, and that it also has a number of guarantees that you're not going to hit obstacles. So this has been addressed, and as a consequence on the aircraft themselves is that you need to ask for a very high safety level, which is, we say, what we call a catastrophic failure, a failure that would cause a loss of the aircraft, should be 10 to the -9 per flying hours. So it's like you could say like a commercial A350 or Boeing 787. So that poses, I would say, issues on the aircraft themselves, but also the sort of alternate where you can land in case something goes wrong has to have also a certain guarantee of safety. You couldn't just decide to land in the nearest field or place available. Thank you.
Thank you, Yves. Ibrahim is keen to answer as well. I see this.
Yeah, what Stephen and Yves mentioned is very essential. While we do this design, we have to make sure the early stage consultation and stakeholder engagement, bringing regulators into the design process from the concept phase to align on safety, airspace, integration, and passenger experience is very essential. And we have to keep in mind the flexible design approach for future regulation. Urban air mobility is rapidly evolving field, and the regulation will continue to adapt. So architects should design the infrastructure of urban air mobility with flexibility in mind, so we allow for a future modification. Just to confirm on Steve and Yves' point, actually, yeah.
No, you're fully right. I think FAA 105 Alpha is not the last, let's say, regulation we have seen, and you're fully right that we need to be ready for other, let's say, revisions of even EASA, and Yves is an open book for that. What regulations can change and how we implement that. I heard a lot about, let's say, safety and security. Let me guide over to the next question. What I have to you, if we look into urban planning and challenges, do you foresee integrating vertiports into dense cityscapes I mean, we heard about what if the aircraft is going down. It's about concerning zoning. I'm coming from heliport design, so I know what it means to land on a helipad on a hospital. What's also concerning, it's about noise. What we heard, it's about environmental impact and accessibility also. And maybe you can share your thoughts on the safety and security key considerations that could be needed for the future. I would like to give this question to Sally, because I think she can give a lot to the table.
Yeah, actually, this would be very interesting because when we look into integrating advanced air mobility into cities nowadays, I think that it's going to change the way we look into land use and zoning and planning cities. Maybe it's going to actually probably flip our diagram, and instead, if the vertiports are going to be placed on top of buildings or on the roofs of buildings, maybe our diagram is going to be the public amenities at the top, and then all the communal amenities at the lower levels. So the other thing would be, how is the land use going to react, whether it's on a tower level or on a low-rise buildings level? How is architects and urbans going to react to the vertiports, placements, locations, and positions? The other thing I wanted to mention is that the positioning of these vertiports, are they going to be based on walking distance, points of interest, near transportation nodes, or near main attractions within the city? And what would be the optimal distance between these vertiports points? This will impact how we actually design and shuffle our urban planning and land uses around that. What would be interesting also to think about is, how is the advanced air mobility going to activate the more mobile locations of the cities? Would everyone, as a result, need to live within the city center itself? Or are we going to activate a more mobile locations around the city and actually have more activations in one centralized city core? That would actually impact cities majorly and massively from an urban planning point of view, and an architecture one as well, in a sense that when we design a building now, are we going to take all the structural considerations to make sure that they can adapt to accommodate the vertiports landing in the future? So all of the relationship between advanced air mobilities, urban planning, and architecture, I think they all need to work together to achieve that step forward in city planning and architecture design. Actually, that's why it's maybe the time to start thinking about that. And it's not too early to think about it, because it's more of a need now, actually, rather than a luxury to think about it. Because of all the population growth and the high density of cities, we need to take that step forward sooner rather than later, if anything. I think I brought up many points here, but it's really high-level thinking on how it's going to impact urban planning and architecture. And maybe we can, someone can take a point and we can talk further in more details about it.
I would love to hear that. And Anna, I see you want to give.
Yes, I think we had those discussions also internally, but from what Sally said, also I think it's not important. It's also important to think about social approach, because yes, we as a planners, as a designers, we want to create amazing ideal world. But then the question is, if zonification or placing those vertiports in some spaces will actually not create subgroups, social subgroups, people with more entitled to use those, because from at least my personal view, people traveling with helicopters actually has got money because they can afford it. So we need to also think if this mean of transportation would be approachable for everyone. So then we can actually have a combined planning of the city buildings and vertiports.
Yeah, thank you. William,
I think it's a very fair, sorry, I think it's a very fair point. We need to ensure accessibility and affordability so that it's not only limited for a certain group of people.
Yeah, I agree. Most of our urban planning in the States anyway is done toward one dense area of a city. So that's where you see your tall buildings and your amenities and so forth. And then you have these swaths of land where people actually live and could use the additional mobility. How do you design that in? Our focus stems from commercialization. So how is that transportation, that new transportation economy going to organically grow from this new vertiport? What type of passenger cargo will be coming in and out to create the jobs to make it, a viable option to put this facility there? I think it takes a new lens to say, this is an opportunity to build not just in downtown Chicago, for example, or downtown LA. It's the opportunity to create a viable economic network born of the existing transportation intermodality, as well as now this new, very cool, urban air, advanced air mobility infrastructure that we're placing. So as designers and architects, we can truly build out this next economy that connects those high net worth individuals that Anna's talking about, all of those assets that they had in the past, to just being a standard capability that we're all looking forward to having as a part of our quality of life.
Yeah, and I need to add something on that as well, because I am, let's say, quite on eVTOLs, but I learned 2 weeks ago on the European Drone Show that there's more than that, and maybe in between the drone technology can bring also a lot of, let's say, impact and improvement on that. So thinking about Amazon is working on just one of these companies working on drone deliveries that you get your package in 30 minutes. It's not about getting the package in 30 minutes. It's about maybe a safety issue somewhere. Someone needs to have a first aid kit, and a drone comes in 30 minutes and help to save a life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to raise a point now that I'm thinking about it. It will actually make our cities more pedestrian friendly, because maybe we wouldn't need that vast amount of land for highways and roads and transport infrastructure and so on. Maybe our cities will actually be more human centric, and the ground is for people and cities for people themselves rather than cities for cars. So maybe it's a big shift in that sense, and we actually go more human-centric and pedestrian-friendly.
That's, Sally, the original premise of our streets, that was for pedestrians.
Exactly. And then it's for cars, yeah.
Sidewalk. Why don't we need a sidewalk? And so now I think we're getting back to that. Hey, it's about the people. How do we design around the people versus what we did for, 100 years, design around the vehicles. So how can we design around the people now? I think it's going to be something we can really do.
I think there will always be the need for roads and all the transport infrastructure. However, this can be reduced, and instead of an 8-lane highway, we can maybe go with 2 or 4, which is really going to enhance the city and urban fabric itself.
Yeah, you hear a lot. There are the naysayers on one side that look particularly at the vehicles, at the aircraft, and they say, well, the aircraft aren't going to be at the point where we can replace ground vehicles. What if they are? I mean, these are the same arguments they had, or we had, about ground vehicles in the beginning. People won't be able to drive faster than 12 miles an hour, or no sane person would get in a mechanized machine that isn't smarter than a horse, right? These are the same levels of conversation we have right now. So when, Sally, you say what you're saying about here's how we design, that's the forethought that we were lacking when we originally designed our roads and our airports and all those other things.
And imagine how much we can enhance people's quality by all of these changes of planning we have in the cities. And instead of you taking, I don't know, an hour to go to work, if you take 10 minutes, you'll have so much more time for you, for your well-being, and to do something probably more productive. So this is all going to reflect on the users of the city or people themselves.
Sure. Yeah, the aircraft will get there. The technology will be there. It's the policy that drives technology that allows us to design and build in what's best for the societies. And I think we can think in those terms in the beginning versus be reactive, which is kind of where we are today.
And maybe here I can say urban air mobility, it's not just a technological advancement. No, it's a challenge for architects, and it's a challenge for urban designer. As architects, we are not just designing a building, but we shaping the way people move and live and experience the cities in the future. So by integrating the urban air mobility infrastructure into our built environment, we ensure that innovation serve people efficiently. So yeah, urban air mobility is not just a technology for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that, architects and engineers are the most hard-headed, persistent curmudgeons on the planet. So you give us a problem or a concept, we're going to design toward that solution. Trying not to say bad words, but we will get to that solution. So if we start conceptualizing the best possible outcome, we'll get there. We'll truly get there. So thinking about the people first is just something that we're designing to achieve. It's not an obstacle that's insurmountable.
It's exactly the master planning piece, what you're saying. Exactly. Yves wanted to give something to the group.
I wanted to say, I certainly agree with what you are describing. I think the urban air mobility, advanced air mobility, regional air mobility should be also something that is not only a technological thing, but and could bring, I would say, progress in the society. But that, I would say, in the immediate, right now, the aircraft are able to carry between 2 and 5 people, so it's rather limited. There are some projects which would be able to carry 40, 50 people, but they are not yet there. And I'm afraid that there's also another problem, which is the problem of the cost. The last indication of cost I had was when Volocopter was planning to fly in Paris last year. For 30 minutes of flight, it was around 100 euro. So 100 euro, 30 minutes, you could say, well, that's a distance airport to city. And I'm not sure that everybody will be able to afford 100 euro to travel in those machines. So my concern is that there will be broadly, right at the beginning, 2 categories of people. Those that are flying in those aircraft and those that are, I would say, having all the nuisance, but are not flying in the aircraft. And that could be, I would say, sort of inequalities and completely different reactions. I would think that the role of both the regulators, architects, local authorities, is also to try and explain what are the benefits of, these activities to those that don't benefit directly of it. And that, for me, is a key issue. There is a need to explain to the people that will be overflown or that will be near the vertiport to tell them that, okay, it's a nuisance, but we can improve it by soundproofing buildings. That has been done, I would say, for airports, building around airports, organizing trajectories, putting certain limits on the operating time, for example. But we probably need also to explain what kind of benefits it will bring in terms of economy for the city. To say, okay, this will bring more jobs. This will bring high-value activity. But certainly, before the sort of ideal world you were describing, there will be these times, and in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, until the end of the decade, I guess, we will need to make a big effort to explain to people that are not benefiting of the system, but there are actually benefits also for them. Thank you.
That's right. I'm looking forward to sit together with you in a maybe a Volocopter, but also giving my 2 cents on that. If they would have flown last year in Paris, maybe the situation for Volocopter would be different this year. But I think the big topic or the big question behind it is the social acceptance, right? The social acceptance of individuals, if this is really just a technology or is it an advancement of all our lives and of living in a city. I would like to go, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No,
I
I was
just
just,
wanted to add
I was going to
also.
say, no, you go ahead.
Go, guys.
Sorry, I just
Anna.
wanted to add about this public acceptance because also as we were thinking, you've got those high skyscrapers with amazing space to rent, to live in, and then the traffic that was before on the ground, now it's in front of your window. And also, well, that might also be a obstacle and needs to be thought through with this public acceptance of the new technologies.
Yeah, I was just going to add on, as the public begins to adopt and accept these technologies, for the price points to be accessible, we have the chicken and the egg. So you need flight transactions. You need to increase the volume to get to those lower price points. You look at companies like Wisk and Joby and Beta, who are meant to have these high transactions between the average consumer or average business, but they have to be adopted or accepted by cities first before the regular person can access them. So how do you get to that high volume transaction to give you that price point? That's the tough part. That's the challenge, So how do we design that?
I think I would like to add one more point to that. We need an early engagement with the community and with people. It shouldn't be just a very exclusive topic and then people just have the result. They really need to be kind of up to date, and they need to be involved early on in all of these conversations and the ideas and the vision and so on. So it's a gradual acceptance of the public to this huge advancement.
I think we need to start now.
Yeah.
I was going to say you have progressive cities and politicians, few. Dallas is a great example where they're embracing urban air mobility and they're really bringing in retailers and others to fly and move packages and people. But then you have other cities and people who really think this is so futuristic that it shouldn't be a consideration now. And I think it's a danger to have expertise like architects, the people in these specialties who aren't paying attention to the possibility to bring transportation economy closer to people who could use it. They're not thinking that way, and they're going to wait for it to happen to start thinking that way. But if we think in the way Sally is talking about, or Ibrahim, we can start to educate these folks to let them know, no, this is here today, and it's about your concept, acceptance, and sentiment that will help craft it to be exactly what you need for your communities, your city, and your economy.
Can I add a question on that, Steve? Oh, sorry, Yves, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say to recall a little bit, as you mentioned, Volocopter and the story in Paris. I did follow it a little bit. It started by they wanted to install a vertiport on a barge on the Seine, which makes a lot of sense. You could say if you have a river, you can probably use it for takeoff and landing. And unfortunately, apparently, an environmental study was not complete. And then when that was put to the political level in Paris, I was amazed by some of the arguments they were using. So they said it would be noisy, it would be polluting, which was showing that they didn't realize that perhaps the aircraft was equipped with an electric engine that was not polluting. So if you want to develop, you need also to approach the public, but also the political people, because they may have completely different views, and they probably need some information to better understand the benefits of the urban air mobility.
No. Anyone else want to give something on the topic? Social acceptance and so on? I was going to ask the question, what I wonder myself, why some cities are more ready than other ones.
I'll give you an inside perspective. We have conversations with all walks of the political spectrum in cities and states. And one common denominator amongst departments of transportation in cities is that they don't deal with flight. And so when you say we want to talk about the integration of advanced air mobility into your transportation system for the betterment of your city, it doesn't resonate. They deal with the movement of trash trucks, placement of sewer caps, the gutterways. This sounds so advanced that it doesn't seem possible, and it seems to usurp their attention away from the sewer cap or snow removal.
Did we lose Steve? Maybe he's coming back. Okay, I will take over on this point. And I like what he said. It's really related to people there. They are, let's say, in the position what they're doing. Let me change to another question. In between, we have maybe Steve back. And considering AAL will require a huge number of aerodromes in the city, and we learned a lot today from, let's say, what can fly maybe tomorrow on goods and passengers. What do you think that AEC means architecture, engineering, construction? Is the industry prepared for this rapid adoption of eVTOLs and drones? Or where do we see the biggest gaps in readiness? I would like to give this question to Sally.
Okay, thank you. Actually, we are not there yet, but we are making progress. To start with, I think AEC is making progress slowly, starting to understand the importance of that, and then we're not there yet. However, there are some steps that we can take now that we have all the very advanced tools of analysis and simulations of cities and the access to AI. We can actually start some steps, as in, with all the analysis we have for the major cities around the world, we can maybe start identifying where to position these vertiports, and then ask the question of modularity, whether we design a module for the vertiports and scalability, so that we accelerate the process instead of maybe designing each one of them to be completely different, which will require obviously longer time to get there and to apply it across the city. Maybe it's a question of design guidelines. Maybe it's a question of clear regulations. And then you have that vertiport that's modular, scalable, and adaptable to different contexts. So this is going to accelerate and help AEC to actually get into that field and provide the vertiports across the different cities. And at the moment, the AEC is facing that challenge of the lack of regulations and zoning. The zoning is does not include all the vertiport positioning or considerations. So maybe the regulations can help the AEC industry and to facilitate that and to give them more space to actually start integrating that within cities. So yeah, some thoughts on that. I don't know what maybe Anna thinks.
Yes, I think you covered very well my thoughts, but also, I mean, again, the question is if, well, yes, the cities are still not ready, and I think because we don't see the need yet for preparing the urban design or the buildings for that. And that's connected to the question, like, again, who's going to build those or ask for those vertiports in the cities? Is it going to be like the private companies or the companies of the aircrafts itself who will start distributing them? So if we know what is the scope of placing and distributing those vertiports around, and then it will be much easier to prepare the construction, prepare the stakeholders and planning and costs. And I mean, that's the basis. We just need to know where is the need for that, and then we can create the space as a designers.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Any more comments on that?
I just want to ask, I'm an enterprise software architect, so you guys have a headway on me. How many more types of zoning considerations must a city have to make now? Because, when we say zoning, there's some typical things that go into considering building a skyscraper, but what new zoning considerations will a city planner need to make now?
I think flexible zones and special adaptations of the existing building structures and how they can react to the new need for positioning of the vertiports. For example, a land use at the moment is limited to commercial or residential and so on. But how much can we challenge that and say, well, it's a mixed use, it's allowed for resi and vertiport, it's allowed for commercial and vertiport and so on. So it's the flexibility and adaptability of our existing zoning planning to react to the need of the positioning or the AAM advancements. Sorry, Anna, go.
No, Sally, I think you were talking more about the buildings, but my question for zoning would be like how we route the paths of travel of the aircrafts. So, and that's for me the most interesting thing, because if we have existent already buildings and then we're building a new ones, how we kind of maneuver between them without actually, I don't know, shading, obstructing the views, or creating some noise that maybe it's not too much, but still it is. So that's, I think, something that it needs to be calculated, and we need programs to actually create those paths to make everyone happy in the city.
No, Anna, you're fully right. You're fully right. This was exactly the next point I was, let's say, guiding through it. And then we have a lot of great people and architects here. They're working with the digitalization of planning and designing. And I think this technology can help to transforming the aerodrome development, that we, let's say, digitalize the planning process and using high cutting edge software platforms like AI and real world flight simulations. And that can enable us as an architect and engineers to optimize this planning process. What do you think are the biggest challenges in bridging design with operational efficiency? Someone want to answer? Ibrahim, maybe? You're on mute.
Can you say again the question, please?
Sorry, there was a cut in line. Are you using AI systems for the moment for planning processes?
Actually, we are using the GIS, which is responsible to define the site location, which is very important to define the zone within this area, which is related to be residential, commercial, or etc., whatever it will be. So, yeah, mainly. Plus, we're using more AI into visualizing, actually, which is there's many shortcuts now, and they make our life easier these days.
Yves, you was raising your hand.
Yes, sir, I was. Thank you. I've seen some, at least I've seen it in the aviation world, where we have started to develop what is called digital twins. And I've also seen that digital twins of cities have been developed. And I was wondering if, I would say, by a clever use of those digital twins and simulation, you could perhaps determine better the trajectories of the aircraft, the location of the vertiport. Well, just a thought, and I'd be interested to hear what others have to say about that, because it could be a way to experiment without costing too much.
Yeah, I think it's something exactly what you can use in an early stage. And I think that can also help to improve the early cooperation between designers and aviation authorities, because planning today in helicopter platform is a totally different story, maybe what a vertiport is in the future. So how we can streamline like project approvals like that, I think Stephen can give a lot to the table on that.
Yeah, thanks. The digitization of airspace has been taking place for few years in traditional airspace. So there are systems that really have digital roads from one airport to the next. The approach that we're taking is kind of twofold. So if you think of what the NASA basic unmanned traffic management system is to do, is to define the capacity of airspace in which these smaller aircraft are going to fly, and allow harmonious integration into the national airspace. So urban air mobility airspace is much lower in terms of altitude, but many of those aircraft will enter an envelope where traditional airspace flies. So we have to design that in. So we need a standard on the ground that gives us that ceiling on urban airspace. And what we did was design and we want this to be an open standard. It's not a proprietary approach. It's to design a 4-dimensional trajectory box. So there's a box that sits in an area where your vertiport's going to be. It defines those potential routes, and it shows those ingress and egress points into that new airspace. Now, as designers, we can begin to speculate what are those best routes. What are the corridors that those routes interface into as that air taxi is leaving traditional airspace and coming into the lower altitude? This is all architectural design. It's just in a different manner. So having a standard roadway, like our highways, in a digital form that shows the different altitudes of low airspace, where we're going to fly and land within that airspace, and then that point in which we are connected to the national airspace system is very important, because where we're placing our physical infrastructure is integral to how we enter and exit the airspace around that that infrastructure. And we can predict all of that using digital tools. The digital twin that Yves spoke of a moment ago is the best possible approach. And that is taking a snapshot of those ground assets and connecting it as waypoints for those aircraft. So now I can see, here's where a 400-foot high antenna is located. My corridor probably needs to consider that. Or we're 3 miles from a major airport. I probably can't design a functional vertiport that close. So if we can have these digital twins that give us that predictability of the ground space assets and the airspace assets as we are planning to integrate them, we can make a ton of mistakes. We can get a lot more sentiment in there to make the adjustments and be closer to correct when we launch that catalyst to show, this actually worked today, and we can improve it tomorrow in these ways. So I think the digital twin is not just an enabling factor, it's an efficiency and safety tool that architects are going to be able to lend to regulators, cities, and commercial providers of these systems.
I have a question to this, Stephen. How is it possible with this digitalization and the box to actually assess if we can use those EVLOTs in the air side and land side simultaneously, so that actually you can land from longer distance and they take the EVLOT on the air side and then just transfer to the city or to another small country that is next door? Like, is there like possibility to merge those two flows?
Yeah. Again, great point, Anna. The premise is commercialization. So it's really, are you moving cargo? Are you moving people? And then you start to think about which aircraft you're going to use at that point. The other part of that is one vertiport is like one fax machine. It's useless. So what is the standard on the other side? My point A has the capacity for a cargo vertiport. And so a certain type of aircraft will be flying in there. Point B may not have that same type of standard. So we need to understand those things on both sides. So an architect will not just look at what that facility can have as far as what the aircraft type will be coming in or going out. It will also need to consider, based on the distance and the commercial capability of the nearby vertiports, are they going to be flying into this area? Can we accommodate these things? Can we play a role in looking at the corridors to also say that this community doesn't want a payload of more than 300 pounds flying over it? So do we have a specialized corridor just for that cargo type of aircraft to fly around? You can take the digitization and add in policy first, right? So you can say, in my box, for example, this box has this emergency safety lane for emergency vehicles, this cargo lane for this vehicle, the lane to traverse across that area is at this altitude, and then the people and the politicians can say yes or nay, and then you can begin to adjust that design to be more specific when you actually put pen to paper. So you can play with this standardized box that has these levels that you now dictate what those levels are, design the corridors in and out, label those corridors in a human readable fashion, and so that machine to machine can communicate and say, this is my corridor as I enter and exit this area. So while there are all these different moving parts, the digitization, the digital twin, the active digital twin gives you the opportunity to take the ground space assets and dream, and the airspace assets and integrate that dream into it.
Thanks, Steve. Before Sally gives a comment on that, I would like to, let's say, remind you we have 30 minutes left, a little less than 30 minutes. So we're receiving already questions from the audience, and I would give them the chance to answer these questions as well. But Sally, go ahead with your comment on Steve.
A very interesting point, Steve. It almost feels like we're going to have land use for on the ground and land use on the air itself and the space itself. But thank you for raising this very interesting point. It seems like, it seems like we're going to have that on like 3D zoning rather than only 2D zoning.
Yeah, the way NASA and other even smaller private companies are approaching unmanned traffic management is capacity. Mm-hmm. How many aircraft can I have in that box? How many aircraft are in that box? How many vertiports are in that box? What are the rules of that box? So our responsibilities will probably expand exponentially in the coming years as designers.
Thank you. Let me ask the first question from the audience. So Rad requested, do you have any perspective for full systems, including UTM systems, together with the planning? Do you know, Steve?
I didn't get the question. Say it again, Ben.
So do you have any perspective for full systems, including UTM systems, together with the planning process?
I still think that there's a lot more collaboration to be had from the political, commercial, not as much the regulatory side to determine the types of systems. But just to give an example, if there's a cargo only vertiport, what are the conveyance requirements? What are the, do we have an area that's dedicated to trucks? Now you're talking zoning to bring that cargo in and out. I think a lot of the concepts need to be built out first before you begin to truly answer that.
Yeah, now I see. Yves is giving 2 cents on that.
Yes, UTM, unmanned aircraft traffic management, is the equivalent for drones that we have that is ATM for aircraft. In Europe, we have developed rules for UTM. We call them U-Space. But at the time being, they are mainly meant for unmanned aircraft. And VTOL being piloted, they are still treated by the ATM system. So the classical approach to aviation is handling the eVTOLs. Now, this is probably only a temporary solution, because when machines like the likes of Wisk will be introduced, which have no pilot on board actually, so they will become, in fact, drones carrying passengers. So there will be a need probably to modify this concept of UTM, which is intended for low-level altitude operation of drones, to also accommodate eVTOLs. But at the time being, UTM is, at least in Europe, is seen as for drones only. Thank you.
Thank you, Yves. Let me ask another question from the audience, and it's more in the direction of the airports. And Hamza said, or questioned, traditional airports prioritize efficiency and passenger flow, while urban projects often emphasize aesthetic and environmental considerations. How do you see vertiport design balancing these aspects? Anna?
Maybe I can say something, yes.
I think so.
I think it's a very good question. However, I think that there is the challenge of safety and security mostly. If we compare airports, traditional airports and vertiports. Yes, we would also think that if you have, for example, passenger flow of small airport, like, I don't know, 1-2 million passengers per year, and then how the vertiports would actually absorb it, well, then we would need to have more vertiports. But then also it's different kind of travel and different kind of type of passenger, in my opinion, that will appear in vertiports. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I think vertiports are going to be way more accessible, like and nearby, rather than airports as in huge infrastructures. So that's really going to change humans' relation to air mobility in general.
No, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
And I think a really important piece is the affordability, and we talked about that intensively in our meeting today. But there also came a question from the audience: how can advanced air mobility infrastructure be designed for affordability, accessibility, and seamless urban integration, allowing all people from different economic backgrounds without becoming a luxury service? How would we address that?
Forethought. I think just being considerate of the environment for which you're designing and the people in that environment will give, and again, get back to collaboration with or between the commercial providers and the politicians. For a commercial provider, let's say a delivery company that's using a cargo hub, to place that hub in an area where it's efficient for them to be profitable, but it can be expanded for use by consumers in the future, should be something that politicians should think about. So you bring in a UPS, for example, to move massive amounts of retail goods, CPG, initially to cover the cost and bring that price down, because there are transaction volumes occurring, can lend itself to the opportunity for people who aren't going to pay that same price that a high net worth individual does just to go, just to fly. So you basically create the roadway specifically for a market that can use it and be profitable from it, but then kind of transfer that outcome to consumers at a lower price point, because you bake that in as a part of the initial design.
Thanks, Steve. I just thought about that. We talked about the potential future activities, and I would like to learn from you quickly. Yes, we have 15 minutes left, more or less 15 to 20 minutes. I have a question regarding, can you share case studies of successful collaborations between architects and regulators? Yves? as you are the pro in regulations?
Well, I certainly, I don't have immediate examples to come because my work was more oriented on the aircraft themselves. But I think, like, everywhere we need to cooperate with all the actors, architects being actors in that system. We need to cooperate with architects. But I think from a regulator perspective, what we always try to bring forward is to say, okay, you have to take into account those safety issues. You have to take into account safety issues being, okay, how you will handle, for example, an accident on the vertiport, because that will happen. We should hide this. That will happen. How do we handle that? How do you also organize the work, the intervention of the city services, the public services, firemen, etc. We also have to talk about security and say, well, there will be a need to ensure a certain form of security on the vertiports, because security being, like the work of TSA in the United States, that's what I mean. Because if people are being brought directly to an airport, they should not have, perhaps again, to go through a security system, not to waste time. So we probably need to have to install those security filters in the vertiport with the appropriate system, or at least think about it. Environment will be the third issue, last but not least. Airports are, in the airport regulations, you usually have something about how you will handle wildlife and what do you do with the waste coming from the airport. You will probably have to address the similar issues on the vertiport. So I think what I'm trying to say, well, there is a need for cooperation, and from my perspective of an old regulator would be to say, okay, we wish you to look at safety, security, and environment. I'm sure you do, but I think that's probably my main message when you are designing an airport, or when you are designing a vertiport or an heliport, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anna.
Yes, I think you brought up a lot of great points, Yves. Especially, well, when we're planning an airport, the regulation is our basis. But also we need to remember, with new technologies, new approaches, and the regulation needs to change. And yes, we still have risks that are the same today, 10 years ago, and also in 10 years. But yeah, for sure, it will be much shorter trip because of what is happening nowadays, the face recognition system, the scanning. Maybe will be just radio scans in the corridors. Some of those technologies are already used in the airports. So yeah, the regulation is really up to date, I guess, and it would need to be up to date in 10 years, probably, when everything will bloom in vertiports design.
Thank you, Anna. I think as former regulator, I would like also to get your inputs, saying, okay, this part of the regulation is not applicable or is not practical, should be modified due to new technology. That's something we also need to know to modify our rules to make them more acceptable. It takes always time, but at least if we get the inputs, that would be good.
Yves, this is a perfect moment to hand over, let's say, to the next question. What I have, let's say, what are the lessons learned from airport master planning and urban zoning and transportation hubs? Do you think something could apply to the design of vertiports and urban air mobility networks? Anna?
I think that yes, in some scale, but I think again that it will be a slightly different system approach, especially if it comes to master planning the airport and vertiport. I think it will be completely different approach. but I always like to compare airports to train stations, so probably vertiports to the airports. So that flow probably will be quite the same, but more, as Sally was saying, human scaled. So probably it will be more approachable again. So that's still how we imagine how we could plan for the passenger, the vertiport.
Thank you, Anna. As we are running almost to end, we have 15 minutes left as we have to close up this meeting. I would like to give you all the chance about, let's say, sharing your final thoughts and, let's say, ending statements. Maybe Ibrahim, what are your thoughts about today's session? What are the learnings?
Yeah, I can. We can put a statement for today, which is urban air mobility. It's unlike a traditional airports, which is the traditional airports are large, isolated, and separated from the urban center. Okay, but the infrastructure for urban air mobility must be embedded within cities, and this means designing a structure that blend functionally and efficiency within the city. Yeah, that's my approach for today.
Well, Sally, come on.
Yeah.
Let's see that.
I'd like to tackle a very important aspect, which is the very rapid population growth in major cities. Actually, the current city's infrastructure is not able to cope with a very big number of population. The train stations, the trains themselves are not able to take the number of people. If you take the Central Line at 6 p.m. in London, it's impossible to get in. So there has to be a solution for it. There has to be an answer to this major crisis and the current infrastructure of cities that's not able to adapt to the very rapid and quick population growth. So in my point of view, the advanced air mobility is rather a necessity than a luxury at the moment to answer many questions and huge problems we have in our major cities right now. So it's something to for me is linked to the population growth, and the need for advanced air mobility is very interlinked, and it's something we need to consider in the now or in the very near future. So it's not a science fiction anymore. It's an answer and a solution for a problem we're facing nowadays. Thank you.
Steve, what is your takeaway?
Well, my takeaway is first to have heard more about the vision of architects, which I probably in my past life didn't hear very much, because I was not really on airports, except right at the beginning. So that is one of my first takes. Probably the second one is also that we have spoken of different resemblance between vertiports and airports planning. I would sum up by saying, well, actually vertiports are bringing aviation to the city, where in the past 100 years, the idea was more to put the airport outside of the city and probably as far as possible to avoid problems. So we are introducing a new idea, which are also involving different actors, or more closely involving different actors than when we were developing airports. But there are still some similarities. I would say the scales at the time being, we imagine, will be different, but you will still need, I would say, place to land on the ground. You will need to have markings to locate that place. You will need to have lighting to see the place at night, and you will need to protect, I would say, the approach and takeoff path from the obstacle, and that is also something which exists at airport level. It will be different, but it's, you would say, in principle, it's the same. And another thing that we have to think about is how you make, I would say, this activity interface properly with the classical ATM activity, I think like Stephen was describing before. Thank you.
Thank you, Yves. Steve, what are your takeaways?
The futuristic nature of UAM, as people think of it, still requires the human in the loop or human in the loop up front. We have to be very thoughtful of these processes. And the other half of that is that we aren't going to regulate away the complexity. If you think globally, there are very few regulations that have actually been solidified for advanced air mobility. Even with EB 105A, this is a guide, and it only focuses on a very small grouping of things that truly only mirror traditional aviation. So the aerodrome or incidents that occur at the aerodrome, the aircraft requirements and devalue size of the aircraft that'll be there. There are many other things that only us humans that are thinking about this futuristic thing and dreaming about what it could be. Only we can input those things into the environment, the political environment, the regulatory environment, to have those things work for us. The regulations out of EASA, FAA, and all of our other groupings cannot give us what we need to make this a safe, efficient, operational environment. We have to be thinking and then sharing those thoughts amongst all stakeholders. We can't wait on the regulators. We can't wait on the technology. We definitely can't wait on the political movement to make this happen. This has to be a collaboration of societal might and a change of mindset that says, hey, we can and we will because we need to.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. Anna, last but not least.
Yes, I think that we should understand that, as it was said before, it's not something futuristic to create a design or master planning for vertiports. It's a future that is quite close future, in my opinion, as we can already we're talking about the subject already vividly for almost 2 hours. So we really need to start implementing it and trying to solve all the challenges that even today we were talking about. I think it's very interesting topic, and it's a very interesting subject to be resolved and to put it in the plans and build it.
Thank you. I think we covered everyone, right? Any more comments? Okay. Thank you for the participation, and I think we covered a fascinating range of insights today from all of you, and specifically from the roles of architects in pioneering UAM infrastructure to the challenges of bridging design and regulations. It's clear that what came out, also collaboration across the industries, is essential to make an urban air mobility a reality. Thank you again for all of you sharing your expertise, and also to the audience for engaging with the discussion. The future AM is, I think, in our hands, and the work that we do today will define the cities of tomorrow. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you, LYNEports, for hosting this event. It was a really good one. Looking forward to meet you next week. And another one, we have session 2 also. Don't forget to join this one as well. Thank you so much.